After the version 3.6 livestream, it's pretty clear that there's a huge amount of content on the way, and the banner lineup is looking absolutely loaded. They are also bringing back Hiyuki, Denia, and Mornye. What makes this especially interesting is that all of these characters are still considered top tier meta, and none of them have been out for very long. So in this video, I'm going to focus only on the rerun characters. I have already made a video about Jingran and Jingchao priority pool, you can check it if you want. So yeah, we are going to talk about each of character's strengths and weaknesses, whether their signature weapons are actually worth considering, go over their overall value in the current meta, and how figure out which banner should realistically be your highest priority in version 3.6. Before we begin, please hit the like and subscribe button. Now if you have done that, let's get this video started. Denia originally released in version 3.3 and she is still easily one of the strongest sub DPS characters in Wuthering Waves. The biggest reason for that is her resonance switch mechanic. Honestly, this is one of the smartest mechanics Kuro has added to the game so far. Any character that can change their combat role automatically becomes much more versatile and usually gets a far better long-term value than a unit that only does one thing. In Denia's case, she can switch between Fusion Burst mode and Tune Strain mode, and both of those modes are genuinely useful. When she is in Fusion Burst, her focus is on applying multiple stacks of Fusion Burst through abilities like her intro skill, Liberation, and the lingering erosion field created after activating her final Liberation. Once she changes into Tune Strain Resonance mode, those exact same abilities instead apply Tune Strain Shifting. That makes it pretty obvious that she was designed to support characters such as Fusion Burst Amiet and Luke Herson, since both of them benefit hugely from having Denia in the appropriate resonance mode for their optimal team setup. On top of applying those effects, she also provides some incredibly strong buffs. Her outro skill gives a huge fusion burst damage amplification, and when she is in Tune Strain mode, it becomes 15% all damage amplification. If the next character that enters the field can inflict Tune Strain Shifting, that buff jumps all the way to 40% all damage amplification, which is a huge increase. She also has a talent that grants additional damage bonus depending on which resonance state she is currently using. So when you look at the whole package, Denia offers a massive amount of utility. She provides powerful buffs, deals surprisingly high personal damage for a sub DPS, has crowd control that helps a lot in AoE content, and can swap it with a standard state and a secondary state that gives her even more burst potential. Taking all of that into account, she is simply a fantastic character for a huge variety of teams. The main reason Denia is returning in version 3.6 is obviously for Jingchao. Her value has actually increased since release because Jingchao gives her another premium team where she performs exceptionally well. If you end up owning Amiet, Luke, or Jingchao once version 3.6 launches, that alone is already a very strong reason to consider pulling Denia. And if you plan to use more than one of those characters in the endgame content, having Denia gives you much more flexibility and lets at least one of them to run their premium composition. The problem is that Denia is extremely specialized. Most of her strongest buffs are designed specifically for Fusion Burst and Tune Strain characters. That means she is not going to replace a universally useful sub DPS like Linnea, and this is probably the biggest thing you need to consider before pulling her. If you already own teams that Denia supports, she is amazing, but if you do not, her value drops quite a bit. However, there is one huge advantage that makes her much more appealing. In difficult endgame content, that flexibility can be incredibly valuable. Instead of forcing Linnea into every strong DPS team, Denia can take over the Fusion Burst and Tune Strain role, which gives your account much more freedom when building multiple teams. And of course, she also works extremely well with Jingchao. So if you are already planning to pull Jingchao, Denia suddenly becomes a much more attractive investment. This is why I think players need to stop judging characters individually. Sometimes the best pull is not the character that with the highest personal damage, but the character that makes multiple teams easier to build, and Denia definitely has that potential. So is her signature worth it? As for her signature weapon, it is definitely her best in-slot option. It increases her personal damage and also improves her support performance regardless of which resonance mode she is using. That said, there are two important things to think about before spending pulls on it. The first is that the weapon is extremely niche. Denia is currently the only rectifier user who can apply either Fusion Burst or Tune Strain Shifting, so the weapon is not going to be useful for anyone else on your account. The second one is that there are already excellent alternatives, especially String Master, which is currently available on the Reverb banner. If you already own String Master, Denia performs well enough that her signature becomes much easier to skip. Her signature weapon definitely looks amazing, and because denia is a sub DPS, it's going to probably stay relevant for a long time. But if your airstrikes are limited and you also want to save for other characters like Chinchou, I would not consider the weapon mandatory. Most of what makes Denia such an incredible character comes directly from her kit and her resonance switch mechanic, not from her signature weapon. Alongside Denia in version 3.3, the Queen of Glacio also made her debut, and she is now returning in the next update. Hiyuki is still one of the strongest characters in the entire game, and together with Denia, she served as one of the headlining units for the second anniversary. That alone already gives her a bit more long-term value than most ordinary releases. As the anniversary's featured main DPS, Hiyuki is honestly still one of the most impressive units Kuro has ever added to Wuthering Waves. One important thing to remember is that the previous premium Glacio main DPS before Hiyuki released all the way back in version 2.0. Because of that, the gap between Hiyuki and older Glacio DPS options is much larger than the gap we see in several other attributes. So if your goal is to eventually build a top tier team for every element, Hiyuki is incredibly strong investment for both your account and the Glacio attribute specifically. Her playstyle revolves around resonance liberation damage and the Glacio Chef mechanic. The core of her kit is that she converts Glacio Chef stacks into Glacio Bite stacks. That conversion is what allows her to deal huge amounts of damage through Glacio Bite, and it also lets her freeze enemies very consistently thanks to her Frostbite interactions. Since Hiyuki can apply Glacio Chef herself, she is relatively self-sufficient and can work extremely well with support such as Lene and Mornye. Neither of those characters applies Glacio Chef directly, but the team is still considered one of her strongest because Lene greatly amplifies liberation damage, while Mornye further strengthens those buffs. That said, her true best in slot composition is the dedicated Glacio Chef team featuring Hiyuki, Lucilla, and either Chisa or Suisui. That setup applies far more Glacio Chef stacks to enemies, which allows Hiyuki to take even greater advantage of her conversion mechanics. Beyond the team synergies, Hiyuki herself has some of the best looking abilities in the game. Honestly, I would not be surprised if a lot of players decided to pull her purely because of how incredible her animations are. In addition to her absurd damage output, Hiyuki can also group and control smaller enemies with her resonance skill while she is in her secondary state. Combined with the large AoE on many of her abilities, this allows her to perform exceptionally well in almost every type of content. Whether it's single target fights, AoE stages, or endgame challenges, Hiyuki generally performs extremely well as long as she has the proper support around her. The important thing to remember is that even at S0, she is already exceptional DPS. She can fit into multiple strong teams and is fully capable of clearing every piece of endgame content when built properly. The downside is that her absolute best performance is still very team dependent. If you are willing to build the proper Glacio focus setup around her, she can absolutely destroy endgame content. But if you want DPS that can be thrown into almost any account and immediately perform at maximum potential, there may be easier options. I think when talking about this character, I could say they are more strengths rather than weaknesses. It clearly shows that how powerful Hiyuki is as a DPS. Now let's talk about her signature weapon. If Hiyuki is going to be one of your primary carry, I would definitely recommend seriously considering it. Like Denia's weapon, it is very specialized because it requires the user to apply Glacio Shave, so realistically Hiyuki is the only character who can fully utilize it. For her specifically though, the weapon provides a very noticeable increase in DPS. There are some workable alternative weapons if you absolutely cannot afford the signature, so it is not a mandatory requirement to make Hiyuki functional. However, to keep things simple, if you plan to use Hiyuki as one of your main characters for endgame content, her signature weapon is absolutely worth considering, just like with most premium DPS characters. What it does provide is more consistency, more comfort, and better long-term performance, which helps extend Hiyuki's overall longevity as a main DPS for your account. Out of all the banners available in version 3.6, I would say Mornye is still the character with the highest overall value. She is a premium support that fits into a huge number of top tier team compositions, and the fact that she remains the only dedicated Toon Break premium support makes her even more valuable. Because of that alone, securing Mornye is easily one of the best long-term investment you can make for your account if you don't already own her. Looking at her support kit, she provides a surprisingly large number of buffs through her Symphony field. While it's active, your team gains 50% of tool build-up rate, increased interaction resistance, 20% additional defense, and continuous healing for the active Resonator. Those effects are universally useful and extremely easy to maintain, so almost any character can benefit from them. The more important part of her kit is the additional damage bonus she can provide, although it does come with a condition. Mornye can grant a massive 40% all damage bonus to nearby allies when enemies are affected by either Toon Rupture or Toon Strength Shifting. To reach the maximum value of that buff, she needs around 260% energy regen. Thankfully, that energy requirement is actually very manageable even without her signature weapon. The only real weakness is that some of her strongest buffs require teammates who can apply Toon Rupture or Toon Strain. Outside of those teams, she is not automatically stronger than Shorekeeper, and she can feel noticeably more niche. What this means in practice is that Mornye wants to be paired with a main DPS or sub DPS that can apply Toon Rupture or Toon Strain Shifting. If your team cannot trigger either of those effects, she loses access to the strongest part of her kit, and the team's overall damage drops noticeably. That doesn't mean she becomes unusable outside of those teams. Some compositions, such as certain monofusion setups where Mornye is used as a support, still perform very well even without fully activating the 40% damage bonus. So it is not completely make or break, but there's a very obvious difference when she is paired with character that can trigger her full passive. Because of that, characters such as Linne, Denia, Amiet, Luke, and of course Jin Chao, which is probably one of the reasons Mornye is rerunning in 3.6, all have extremely strong synergy with her. The Linne interaction is especially important. When Linne and Mornye are used together, they become flexible enough to support almost any main DPS, even if that DPS is not built around Toon Break mechanics. That flexibility is a huge reason why Mornye is considered such as valuable support. That is exactly why Mornye should be considered one of the strongest long-term pulls in the game and a high priority target for anyone who does not already have her. The one thing I cannot recommend nearly as strongly is her signature weapon. It is in a very similar situation to weapons like Shorekeepers and Suisuis, where there is already excellent free alternative that every player can obtain. As long as you have Discord, and especially if you have it at high refinement, it performs well enough that you can comfortably skip Mornye's signature weapon. Her signature does provide additional value, particularly because it grants extra crit damage to allies, but the gap between Discord and her signature is simply not large enough to justify spending valuable astrites, especially when those pools could instead go toward a completely new character or main DPS signature weapon that provides a much larger power increase. So after considering everything, my conclusion is very simple. Mornye herself is an incredible pool and one of the best support investment available in version 3.6. But her signature weapon is easy skip unless you have a large amount of astrites to spare and are already satisfied with your upcoming character pools. Overall, it's pretty obvious that version 3.6 is going to do everything it can to empty everyone's astrite savings, especially with Scene expected to arrive in the following update. Even if these banners feel like bait before a major release, they still have a huge amount of value. The two new featured characters are both main DPS units, but they are designed for completely different roles. Jin Chao is shaping up to be a Toon Strain focused DPS, very similar to Luke, while Jingran is a fusion heavy attack DPS, whose playstyle feels much closer to Augusta. Once you add hiyuki into the equation, you are basically looking at 3 different top tier DPS options competing for your pools. Nothing is officially confirmed yet, but Jingran will probably end up around Amiet's level in terms of overall damage. He looks more like a unique and specialized DPS, he should perform extremely well, and his main selling point is that his best in-slot team consists of older characters. Yes, we are looking at Yuno and Shorekeeper. Most players probably already own them, so I think Jingran's team investment is not that heavy. So the real comparison is hiyuki versus Jin Chao, and that decision mostly comes down to which teams and supports you already own, or which ones you plan to pool. Hiyuki is a negative status Glacio DPS, while Jin Chao is a Toon Strain Aero DPS. Their premium team compositions are already fairly clear, so the better choice is simply the one you can support more effectively with your current roster. One nice thing is that hiyuki and Jin Chao do not conflict with each other at all. That's very different from the situation between Jin Chao, Amiet, and Luke, where all 3 want many of the same Toon Break oriented supports. If you already have hiyuki and her Glacio team fully built, and you are looking for another strong endgame DPS or your aero roster is lacking, then pulling Jin Chao becomes a very reasonable investment as long as you have the right supporting characters for her. As for Denia, I think the reason to pull for her is much more specific. She is really worth considering only if you own one of the main DPS characters that use her in their best in-slot teams. As mentioned earlier, Fusion Burst Amiet, Luke, and Jin Chao all benefit hugely from having Denia in the premium setup. So if you own any of those characters and want to maximize their damage potential, then Denia becomes a very important pool. The final character to talk about is also probably the most important pool for the majority of players, and that is Mornye. If your account has any Toon Break oriented main DPS or sub DPS, Mornye opens up a huge number of powerful team combinations. That makes her one of the best support investment available in version 3.6, and the fact that she performs extremely well without her signature weapon makes her especially free-to-play friendly. Her S1 is also incredible, making her more universal and can have the best synergy with almost any DPS in the game. So in the end, there's honestly a lot of choice, and almost every character mentioned here is still considered top tier meta. Because of that, it's actually pretty hard to make a completely wrong decision. The only thing I would keep in mind before spending everything is that Sin is very likely releasing in version 3.7, so try not to burn your entire savings in 3.6 unless you are completely certain about your priorities. So that's all for who to pull rerun video for Wuthering Waves patch 3.6. So far, which banner interests you the most? Are you going to pull the new resonators or instead pull the reruns? Please let me know in the comments. I hope this video is useful for you guys. If you feel so, please hit the like and subscribe button. Turn on notification as well so you won't be missing out on any of my Wuthering Waves content. I will see you guys on my next one. Bye bye!